This short audio article, by Jericho Intercession, is a comparison between the lunacy of Trump, the flailing president, and the fiendishness of Saul, the tragic king. 1 Samuel chapter 18 verses 10 and 11 reads, "The next day an evil spirit from God came forcefully on Saul. He was prophesying in his house, while David was playing the lyre, as he usually did. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled it, saying to himself, 'I'll pin David to the wall.' But David eluded him twice." Many scholars have parsed words trying to explain this away as some kind of medical or psychological illness. But the literal text goes far beyond that. The fact that he was prophesying at the time also suggests he was under the control of a supernatural force. Similarly, many top psychiatrists have attributed Trump's behavior to malignant narcissism. But a comparison between President Trump and King Saul provides some eye-opening insights. Donald, a charismatic figure, was the son of Fred Trump, a wealthy landowner. Saul, like Trump, was a charismatic leader and son of Kish, a wealthy landowner. Donald became a wealthy property owner who was elected to a presidency he never wanted, that forced him to wage a bitter, unending feud with the Democrats and more than half of all Americans. Saul also became a wealthy property owner who was thrust into an unwanted kingship that denied him the simplicity of his previous life and forced him to fight interminable bloody wars with the Philistines. Saul's unhinged mind went from listening to David's soothing music to trying to pin the harpist to the wall. The biblical accounts attribute these brutal mood swings to an evil spirit that would come upon him. Donald is also driven by a mindset controlled by forces, which defy scientific inquiry, that none of his top Confederates understand, as they are soon to find out when they become his victims, or his enemies, or even get destroyed, like many of his previous associates. And even Elon, his de facto co-president, will one day have a reckoning. A falling out at some point in time, when Trump asks him to cross a line he cannot cross, or vice versa, as he did to his former vice president, Mike Pence. Saul's violent temper had no boundaries. In his jealousy and suspicion of David, Saul made numerous attempts to kill him. However, after a conversation with his son Jonathan, Saul had a sudden change of heart and ordered his men to cease their efforts to kill David, declaring, "As the Lord lives, David shall not be killed." Despite this, Saul was again overcome by an evil spirit, and while David played the harp for him, Saul threw his spear at David once more. Even when Jonathan later defended David and questioned his father's relentless pursuit to kill him, Saul's fury was such that he hurled his spear at his own son. A closer look at Trump's volatile temperament shows. Trump was infamous for his extreme mood swings, which often left his cabinet, staff, and aides in a state of constant apprehension. Former Trump White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson testified that, in a moment of rage, President Trump hurled his lunch against the wall in the West Wing dining room after then Attorney General William Barr refuted claims of widespread election fraud. "I first noticed ketchup dripping down the wall and a shattered porcelain plate," Hutchinson told the House panel. The valet explained that the president was extremely upset about the Attorney General's interview with AP and had thrown his lunch, necessitating cleanup, she added. "So, I grabbed a towel and started wiping the ketchup off the wall to help the valet." Hutchinson mentioned that this was not the only instance she was aware of Trump losing his temper. She noted there were several occasions during my tenure with the chief of staff where I knew of him either throwing dishes or flipping the tablecloth. In 2016, Donald Trump was an unconventional candidate, but one trait distinctly set him apart: an obsessive focus on raw and naked political violence. Cassidy Hutchinson further described a president whose long-held violent revenge fantasies came to fruition on January 6, both personally and politically. She testified that Trump not only knew supporters were carrying weapons at the rally but also angrily demanded they be allowed into his event without being searched, and said, "They can march to the Capitol from here." She recounted hearing that an enraged Trump had attempted to seize the steering wheel and possibly lunged at the clavicle of a Secret Service agent in a bid to join his supporters at the Capitol. She recalled hearing White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows convey that Trump concurred with the rioters chanting "Hang Mike Pence" as they sought to overturn the election results by any means necessary. He spoke of illegally ordering torture and committing heinous war crimes before cheering crowds. He publicly refused to commit to accepting a peaceful transfer of power. During a debate when asked about potential violence from far-right supporters, such as the Proud Boys, he stated they should stand back and stand by. Although their members were charged with seditious conspiracy for their involvement in January 6, in the grossest misuse of the pardon power since the nation's founding, he pardoned them all. During his second term, he has evolved into a man consumed by retribution and an insatiable lust for more power. He has weaponized the government against his opponents, mooted the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state, proposed the purchase of Greenland from Denmark, and threatened the forcible seizure of the Panama Canal. In his bid to enrich himself and his billionaire cronies, he has empowered his top donor, Elon Musk, to dismantle federal agencies with reckless abandon, completely disregarding the impact on his own supporters. Conclusion: this kind only comes out by prayer and fasting. Trump forfeited his soul to gain the whole world. See Matthew 19 verse 26. And now it appears, his mind has been overtaken by not one like Saul, but by many supernatural entities, that he is helpless to rid himself of without God's hand of deliverance. All that mumbo-jumbo about taking over Canada, Greenland, the Panama Canal, his blatant corruption and defiance of the rule of law, his cozying up to brutal dictators including his channeling of Adolf Hitler, his long list of targets for retribution, his horrifying attacks and extortions of Ukraine's president and his talk of Ukraine surrendering to Russia, his attempted insurrection, his attacks on women and minorities, and now his dismantling of the federal government are all animated by evil spirits. Speaking of the evil one, John 10 verse 10 reads, "The thief comes to steal, kill and destroy." Mark 5 verses 6 to 9 reads, "When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, 'What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name don't torture me.' For Jesus had said to him, 'Come out of this man, you impure spirit.' Then Jesus asked him, 'What is your name?' 'My name is Legion,' he replied, 'for we are many.'" In Mark 9 verse 29, Jesus said, "This kind only comes out by prayer and fasting," referring to a specific type of demon that his disciples were unable to cast out, emphasizing the importance of prayer and fasting in spiritual warfare.